Today we're going to be talking about how to build learner progressions. So in this video you're going to learn how to build a learner progression. I'm going to help define what learner progressions are, how they play into proficiency scales, which are commonly associated with this. You're also going to learn why this is important for students, for student clarity, teacher clarity, which is extremely important. And we will also discuss how it helps evaluate resources and to add to other resources inside of your classroom. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first step is, how do you actually build one of these? How do you actually build a learner progression? Well, you first build your mastery column. So you're going to want to make sure that you design something very similar to this right here, which I'm putting inside of yellow. This is basically set up kind of like a rubric. On the left, you're going to see that I'm going to highlight right now. This is the standard over here on the left. So you can see that this one is explaining how images support text. So as I said, the first step is to define what mastery is. And you start with that column first. So if it were me, and when other people do this, they think, well, what does it take to demonstrate mastery on this standard? What are the things that I want my students to be able to do or demonstrate and show, those kinds of things, in order to show me that they have a deep understanding of the standard? And this can typically be broken down into several different criterion steps. So if you see right here, everything that would be following along this way from left to right, so from left to right, this is all one layer of criteria. So that red right there, that would be the one criteria. So you can see here it says, I know how to use images to gather extra information to better understand and support the text. So that criteria down here at a level 1, that would be a lower level moving towards mastery of that standard. So that would be one criteria there. Everything in this column would be a second criteria, and that would be that blue criteria, and then everything here would be that third criteria. All right? But the first step is to basically just consider how much or what does it take to demonstrate mastery in that standard. So consider that. You get those put down there, you're doing pretty well. You're going to also, in order to build this the right way, in order to get all of these different things right here, in order to get those things of mastery, not only do you have to think about what it takes for that standard, but you also want to be thinking about what are the assessments that you currently have in your practice, or what assessments are you going to utilize as well. You want to make sure that you also unpack that standard. So you're going to want to go in and read the standard. What I'm highlighting in green here, this is the actual language of a standard. You're going to go in and read all of that to make sure you have a good understanding of that, and make sure that that information is put into the different criteria. Now, what is another thing, if you are in a testing grade, you really want to make sure that you go in and analyze any test questions that go with that standard, because you're going to want to make sure that that gets placed in here somehow. Because what the state is demanding of students has clearly unpacked that standard already. And you're going to want to make sure that you analyze their work in order to ensure that that mastery is happening at your level as well. And as I also shared, you want to go in and look at the assessments that you have in place. For example, in my building, we use iReady a lot, and we use standards mastery assessments. And this, what I just highlighted in teal here, this is a standards mastery test. So we take a look at those standards mastery, and we ensure that our students are able that we build our level 3 mastery at the high enough rigor to make sure that students are able to pass standards mastery, to demonstrate mastery on those, and that they're going to be able to demonstrate mastery on the state achievement test, and that we've taken a look at the state standard and ensured that mastery would be on the only thing that could outcome from this learner progression as well. So you want to make sure that you take a look at all of those things. Not only do you want to make sure you look at those, but you want to do this work with a group if at all possible. So it's best to build this as a grade level or a content area if you're in upper grades. Just don't be afraid to take on this work, even if you have to do it alone. It is time consuming, it does take a while to build these, but it's extremely worth it. So you can always build these and tweak them later once you get other people's input if you do have to do it alone. So let's explore some more here. So after you get that level 3, as we just talked about, I said that level 3 is your first step. You want to make sure you have all of this. You want to build it off of all those assessments that we just talked about. So once you get that level 3, once you have that level 3, you definitely already have a great understanding of the demands of the standard. So this work that you're doing on these learner progressions is extremely important, because after you do this, you have a better understanding of what those state standards are asking your students to do, and you have a better understanding of how to support them inside of your small groups, which is extremely helpful. It's also helpful to consider what you know students typically have misconceptions on, or where they have difficulties. You know, if you've been teaching for a few years, rely on that to help you build your lower levels. So, for example, at just starting here, level 1, and approaching level 2, all of this language here, we know that where I'm putting this green dot, that this is mastery. Well, everything below mastery, everything below that, that is going to be a level down. So this is like level down to level 2, then we go down to a level 1. So this language should be progressively showing that students have less understanding of the standard. So as you move this way, they have a less understanding. And if you move up to exceeding, which is very rare, your 4s would be if they're exceeding, they're going beyond the mastery of that standard. They're either applying it in a deeper way or working at grade level, working on grade level things above that. It just really depends on your philosophy and how you want to do that. The exceeding can be tackled several different ways. Typically what we're doing is we're taking opportunities. If it makes sense, we kind of build in a way for them to make a nice step into the grade level above them. If it doesn't, we look for more opportunities to have students take that standard and apply it in a more meaningful way. So in this example, it says understand measurement with different units. So as I said, this right here, all of this is one criteria, and it goes from level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Level 3 is mastery. So that's where we want to get to. All right, so think about those misconceptions and what students typically do in your classroom, and that helps you build the lower levels. So level 1, level 2 will guide your small groups. So we hear this a lot. So we hear a lot that we hear a lot and we see a lot that the small groups that are happening in classrooms are just basically a reteaching of the same standard or the same lesson. Well, with learner progressions, it helps you get away from that, okay? So for example, each of these level 1 and level 2 here, I may have a group of students that I've got to teach this specifically to in order to get them to level 3. So these level 1s and level 2s, these different criteria and the way that they're leveled, they help you build groups according to what they need. I may have a student that is right here. I may have a student that's right here, and right here. Well, if I have 5 other students that are very similar to that student, I can put those students together and form a group, and I'm going to be able to be very strategic with what I'm going to teach them. Okay, so level 1s, level 2s really help you build your small groups outside of that. Building learner progression, takes time. It does take time. It's not something that you're just going to be able to burn through, because you've got to analyze all of those different things that we talked about previous to this. So you want to make sure that you know it's going to take a little bit of time to put these together. But if you have a grade level working on it, it does make it a little bit lighter and quicker work. All right. Learning progressions help weed out resources. One of the most vital things about a learner progression is the fact that learner progressions, these guys right here, they help you evaluate your resources, which is so extremely important. There's lots of times that I'm in classrooms and I will see resources that are being used with great intentions, and however the resource does not match the standard specifically, and it may even be leading to some misconceptions. Not only have I seen it in classrooms, I've done it in classrooms myself. I have I did not build learner progressions. I didn't have a clear understanding what the standard was asking students to do. So I took my best shot at finding resources and working with them. So you'll want to make sure that you use your learner progressions to help analyze your resources. Over here is a picture, a snapshot from a Schoology course that was created. All of this content, all the content that's created in this Schoology course goes back to these level 3s. So each of these videos that you see right here, they're going to go back to a certain point on that learner progression. And what that does is that helps us identify which one of these different criteria lanes do we need to make sure that we pull small groups and meet with those kids, provide more supports for them. So learner progressions help you weed out your resources. They help you figure out exactly what you need to be teaching, how to teach it. Learner progressions have an impact. I cannot stress that enough. You build your student rubrics off your progressions. So down here, those level 3s that we talked about that you build in your learner progressions, those learner progressions actually get transferred onto student rubrics. So that's why, another reason why they're important, because the language that you put on these learning progressions is the language that students are going to see in their standards, their student rubrics, and that's something that we'll explore in another video called Self-Directed Learners. So if you take a look at that, you'll see how the learner progressions drive that. Progressions help you and your students also evaluate their understandings, and they help you adjust their learning path. So for example, you can see that all these students right here, this is a picture of a student or teacher, who just started out in this process, and all of her students, majority of her students, are on the same standard currently because they literally just started. But she's able to break these kids down according to what's on her learner progression. So for example, maybe these students right here, those 4 students, maybe they need to work on some level 2 pieces on the standard, and then these students right here that I'll put a box around, kind of, maybe those 4 students, maybe they need to work on, they've got some mastery components, but then they have some level 1 components. So the teacher can be very precise with how she works with them in their small group according to what's on that learner progression. All right. Now let's take a little look at why it's important to do this, because another big thing that goes with everything that I've already shared is the fact that learner progressions have a huge impact on learning because they help build clarity to teaching, not only for the teacher but also for the student. The big thing is the clarity for the teacher and the resources, which is extremely important because everything is going to be talking and working together. I talked about this in previous videos, but just so we have a common understanding, John Hattie is a major researcher who's done a lot of analysis. He said that the hinge point, which means teacher effectiveness, kind of typical teacher effectiveness in the classroom, falls between 0.2 and 0.4. So right here in this orange area, typical things in the classroom fall in that area. So he puts a lot of different things that he looked at a lot of different things inside of a classroom to determine where they were, and one of the big things that we're talking about is this idea of clarity. How effective is clarity? Well, if you look at this chart right here, just having teacher clarity, meaning that teachers understand the standards, teachers know how to teach the standards, teachers have resources that best match the standards, and teachers are able to share that information with students and build clarity with students. When a teacher has that understanding, which learning progressions gives you, then that alone has a very large impact in the classroom. You can see that it's 0.75. So it actually would be falling over in this area, which is a zone of desired effects. That means that it is a strategy or something that can happen in a classroom that is more effective than what normally or typically happens in a classroom. So taking this step onto learner progressions, there's research behind that, and it's going to add this idea of clarity across your resources, students, and teachers, which is extremely important. Hope you enjoyed learning about learner progression.